Hey everyone, how's it going tonight? You're all having a great day, great night where you're at. I am back from the Dead 1 and checking out the update to Hellblade Senua Sacrifice, and also gonna talk about struggles I've had when I was younger all the way up to today with personal mental health issues. Kind of struggle with this one as far as something I wanted to do for a long time, and not an easy subject to talk about, but one I've always felt like I needed to share my story on. Just not easy. So here we go. Definitely from my personal experience with mental health issues, it definitely changes the person you are. For me growing up, one of the things that happened when I was a kid was physically abused by my dad, and it took a long time, probably about 8, before my mom even figured out it was happening. Even to the point that my dad would grab my arm. He would actually grab my arm so hard that it would leave bruises in the shape of his fingerprints on my arm. And eventually wound up trying out family counseling up to a certain extent, but by the time I was 10 years old, my parents decided that it wasn't helping enough, and they wound up getting divorced. Later on, wound up going to different psychiatrists and got diagnosed with bipolar depression and ADD. While later, also diagnosed with anxiety disorder and seasonal depression. Give you an idea kind of stuff that I've had to deal with in the past. It's easier to control now than it was back then, because over time I learned how to manage my issues. And maybe about 12 years I was on a variety of different drugs, from Adderall to Prozac, Xanax. Even tried natural remedies like fish oil tablets can help. Went through about 12 years of therapy and probably about 10 to 12 different psychiatrists slash psychologists. Pretty much everyone involved in my therapy, they knew that I had anger issues and problems controlling my emotions, but they didn't know that between the age of 10 and 14 that I was also contemplating suicide. And anytime I would try and talk to someone about it, that I would always pose it in a way where it sounded like I wanted to understand what people like me, like, what was the thought process? How did you overcome it? How did other people overcome it? And I always seemingly got the answer that that's insane. Don't think like that. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. It wasn't still kind of a tough thing to talk about these days. And so, yeah, trying to talk to people about how others would deal with similar issues. I was kind of pretending that it wasn't me, it was someone else, or I just wanted to understand things I heard about, while all the time I was actually referring to myself that had the issues. And always kept getting that same response that you should avoid that as much as possible. And got people saying, well, that's just insane. And the whole time thinking in the back of my head, I know I'm insane. I know what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking about isn't normal. Help me find a way out of it. Help me think my way out of it. Help me do something. And I just couldn't find it. So because I couldn't talk to people, I tried looking for anything that would give me some perspective on it or help me move through it in some sense. Whether that was religion, what I believed in, video games, music, just hanging out with people so you wouldn't have to be alone with your thoughts. That's definitely one of the worst parts about when you're trying to battle depression or contemplating suicide, any of those myriad of issues, if you're hearing voices in your head, or if you're having hallucinations or visions or whatever you want to call it, images in your mind, the worst time is when you're alone because you are in that frame of mind. You already feel alone and that no one cares. When you're physically alone, it's all you know, it's all you think about. It's hard to explain because imagining that you can be in a crowd of people or you can even be sitting down with a bunch of friends and you're still in that dark place in your mind where only pain exists. And over time, when you're stuck in that place in your mind for so long, eventually your mind will just get exhausted and everything gets stripped away to the point that your heart and your emotions start to fade out and you're just numb. And then your body feels weak, like the energy is just getting sucked right out of you. And then eventually all you're left with is force of will to the point that even the worst thoughts in your mind seem normal, even if you are at the point where you don't think they're normal. But yeah, so at that point, I was just looking for anything, anything helpful. And at the time, playing different games like WCW vs. NWO, Revenge, Resident Evil 2, GoldenEye, Red Alert, Dark Forces, any games that where you felt like you were the hero saving the day because in your mind you couldn't even save yourself. You couldn't even control those variables in your mind where in a video game, assuming there's not bugs and glitches, you can just press a button and the character or the vehicle or whatever you're controlling with your controller, it just worked. In your mind, it doesn't always, if something's broken, your mind won't function the way it's supposed to. But as long as the controller is working properly, the game just works. It doesn't, it's almost reassuring that you can count on it that it will work when in your mind your whole world's crashing down. So you're trying to find something outside of yourself that's reliable. And also have music. I grew up with contemporary Christian music. It's what my parents would listen to, but my sister would listen to more pop music, and my brother would, and she listened to this kind of the same thing my parents but yeah, my parents and my sister would listen to stuff like Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis Chapman, where my brother would listen to Christian rock. Yeah, Christian rock bands like Petra and Supersonic. So I had a good variety of music, and then I would have friends to listen to R&B and rap. So I got exposed to a lot of different kinds of music as a young age, and variety of different bands where you would get a different perspective or a different sound from wherever you listen to. And a friend of mine, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, introduced me to a rock station that I lived near at the time. From there, I started listening to stuff like Rob Zombie, Disturbed, Metallica, a lot, but at the time, yeah, if I remember correctly, Nickelback. And then later on, finding bands like Linkin Park, 3 Days Grace, Breaking Benjamin, and more recently, finding even more bands, newer ones, like Wolves at the Gate, Theory of a Dead Man. I can't remember when I first heard Papa Roach. That could have been a long time ago. They were pretty popular. And then at the same time, my brother started listening more to country music. So I wound up listening to stuff like Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Kenny Chesney. And one time where my sister came back from her youth group at church, and she said, well, there's a new band that coming to the youth group to play a show for them. I'm like, okay, well, what's the name of the band? And she said the band's name is Skillet. At the time, and the entire time I was contemplating suicide, she didn't know. And it was so difficult to relate to people because it felt so dark in my mind that the typical people you would run into at church would be dressed up in suits and tie, or at the very least dress pants and dress shirt and tie. And inside I just didn't feel that put together, or that there was so much darkness and it looked different. You know, I viewed myself different than I saw the people around me. When I saw a picture of Skillet, and I thought they almost looked on the outside, I felt on the inside. In my mind, that I believed my entire body was just shutting down, that my mind and everything was dying. To the point that I had, whether you think it was visions, hallucinations, whatever you would call it, of shadows or phantoms or demons. And I would try to fight them in my mind, but every time I went to hit them, they would disappear. But at the same time, these almost looked like ringwraiths with sharp claws, and I would swing at them in my mind and punch straight through them, but when they hit me, it would slash right through my skin. And these visions could happen at any point. It could be late at night, it could be I could be acting normal, sitting, watching a movie with my family. And nobody knew that this was passing through my head. Yeah, it was a long time. You saw again disappearing and reappearing. Before I figured out that it was my mind. Because I believed that I couldn't fight back in my own mind, that I was destined to fail just to be tortured in that space. And eventually got the idea that it was my mind and I could create a way to fight back with my own thoughts versus the literal sense of I'm just trying to hit something physically. No, this is my mind and I make the rules here. And I can change the rules because this is a place that is built in my mind. But yeah, and sometimes I would start to hear voices in my head where they would tell me anything from everyone hates you, you have no hope, just give in, why don't you just kill yourself? And at the start, the voices would just be whispering. And it would build up over time until they were talking normally. And then finishing, they were screaming in my ear. Even though there was nothing there, it was all in my mind. And sometimes it would be so bad that even if I picked up a fork, a knife, any kind of power tool, anything sharp enough, that look at it and think it would be so easy, or in that state it would be so much less painful just to give in. And eventually my thoughts got to the point where I thought there's only two ways out of this. Either I'm gonna fight like hell and beat it, or I should just give in now because I might as well not suffer through this if I'm just going to give in the end. And even to the point of, I really just, no one would talk about this with me. I just had to kind of figure it out on my own. Much as how when you're trying to deal with mental health issues, there's certain, I guess what are usually referred to as triggers. And triggers are pretty much anything that would set you off and put you in a state of crisis. To the point that you're that close to the edge and at any point you could jump off. Where if you learned how to avoid them, it was easier to fight back, where you wouldn't have to fight so hard because you hadn't let the situation get to that point. But yeah, the other thing that was good was kind of listed a lot of the bands that I used to listen to, but songs in particular, one of them that when I was looking for anybody that talked about or anything close to what I went through, the song Down with the Sickness by Disturbed, how it talks about abuse and the hazards of if you don't break the chain, what's going on in your family, you can just wind up repeating the cycle. That someone has to stand up and fight back if you're going to end this. Make a change so that the same pattern doesn't keep repeating. And that's something I definitely try to do. Not saying I don't make mistakes or, everybody makes mistakes, but yeah. But yeah, another aspect of what I went through was there was some pretty crazy stuff going on in the world at the time. Where, double check, make sure I got the date right. Yeah, a couple of the pretty tragic events when I was having severe issues with mental health were both the Columbine shooting and 9/11. That as a kid trying to process that, and you're already having mental health issues and contemplating suicide, your fear can become so overwhelming of everything going on that yeah, you just think there's no way out. I almost want to give in because I want to take control of what's going on. Yeah, so that gives you an idea of how video games and music and as far as friends and family helping. Your view of your family in that state is kind of interesting because, at least for me, I knew they cared about me. I knew they wanted me to be okay, but it was difficult because I didn't trust anyone to talk about it with. And one of the people that really helped was the youth pastor at the church that I went to at the time. Even though I wasn't old enough to be in the youth group, that I would just go up and talk to him every Sunday because I just wanted someone who there was almost no reason other than just being a nice person or making time for someone why I would be talking to him. And even to the point he almost seemed severely annoyed with me that I was taking some of his time. Yeah, that I was taking some of his time, and he was supposed to be helping other people at the time that were, welcoming new people coming to the church. But he was always nice enough to take a few minutes of his time to talk to me about. It wasn't even about anything serious. It could have been mostly just random stuff, like different outings that we go on as a church, or music, or movies, or anything really. And almost to the point that I viewed it as someone who cared enough to take the time and really didn't have to the point that if someone cared like that, I would be okay because there was something pushing me to that point where I could push through the next week. If you just saw someone like that would care. Sometimes it being so bad with all the issues I was going through, if I can make it one more week and talk to the youth pastor, that I would see that somebody cared enough to take the time for me and there was a reason to not kill myself. Definitely do not underestimate the power of being that person for someone where it doesn't have to, if you're trying to help somebody, you probably won't even know that you're helping them through a horrific state of crisis by just being there, or just being a friend, or just playing a video game with them, just hanging out with them, because you really don't know what's going through that person's mind, what's going on in the background, where what you can see seems pretty normal. and they could just be at the point where the last straw could make them want to end it. So yeah, I mean, that's sometimes it's more obvious, or some people are more open, but yeah, I'll always try and make time for people. Part of that being because I just enjoy hanging out with different people and meeting new people and playing video games with everyone. That's definitely part of the fun of this hobby. Yeah, and you can also kind of think of it this way. You see the world as normal, where walking through all this fire, running through, choking on smoke, this is how somebody in crisis could view the world. That everything is burning and there's no hope. They're just limping through their next day. Yeah, eventually I got to a point where I was strong enough to push through my own circumstance. We moved back to my mom moved us back to my hometown, and she thought that was the reason why I was so happy, why I wasn't so angry anymore. Where the reality of it was, I finally found my way out of 4 years of living in hell, thinking that any day could have been my last because my mind could just give in. Even to a certain point, there was really a point where I would think I'm still in that fight. I'm still trapped in this nightmare, and you keep fighting even though you're out of the chaos, you're out of that living hell. But you keep fighting because the fight is all you know. And it took a while for me to realize I don't have to fight anymore. I'm okay. When I say I'm okay, that's my version of I'm okay, not a normal person's version of I'm okay. Yeah, you'll definitely hear me say sometimes, well, what somebody says, well, that's normal, and I'll respond to them, well, what is normal? Because normal at one point in my life was being able to make friends, being able to process things in a normal way. My view of the world was normal. To normal was a thought at one point, no matter how crazy it sounds or how off it sounds, that normal was I could solve all my problems by jamming a knife into my throat. And most average people would not think that's a normal thought, but in a sense it was a normal thought for me at the time, because that's how lost my mind was in there were some pretty dark points where the worst thought you could possibly imagine entering your head was quote unquote normal. So yeah, normal at some points in my life definitely would not have constituted as normal for the average person. To me, that was just part of what I was going through. But yeah, and so over time, it would get a little bit easier to manage until I think I might have been probably like 22, 23 years old, and got to the point where I've been off the pharmaceutical medications, stuff you actually have to go to a drugstore for, like Prozac or Adderall and Xanax, all that stuff. I mean, if that stuff helps you, fantastic. For me, I already had bad memory issues, so occasionally I would forget to take my pills, and then I'd be going through withdrawal symptoms, and that is definitely not something you want to have an issue with. After I was out of that horrible frame of mind, I started to think about how I would like to help people like myself, but pretty much immediately getting the sense of how can I find people like myself? How can I find people who want to talk about this, have experienced it? That there wasn't any judgment, or that it was easy to talk out about the issues that you've had in the past, issues that you currently have, or ones more recent. And I will say, definitely over time, mental health awareness has gotten drastically better. Almost there's no real comparison to what it was before, because 20 years ago, at least I didn't see too many people speaking out about mental health awareness. Where now it's a much broader subject that brought up. And I think it's fantastic that we can be a little bit more open about what each of us are going through, but at the same time, we still have a far ways to go. I mean, I was lucky that I found a couple of friends right away that had gone through similar life experiences. But yeah, and over time, I got more comfortable talking about my past, and in hopes that I could eventually do something like this or talk to people about it, that any insider experience of mine would hopefully help them either to recognize that they're not alone, or that they don't have to, that they can talk about their past, or even more important, that they could talk about what they're going through currently. And one of the more important aspects that definitely a hope for myself, that it would be amazing if I could ever help anyone that was truly in crisis to the point of metaphorically pulling them back when they're standing on the edge. Because I am very fortunate that there were people there for me at the darkest points of what I went through. But yeah, and eventually it got to the point where luckily I found a few friends I knew I could talk to because they had similar experiences. And that definitely helped a lot. And then I would meet even more people, where the first time you start to talk about mental health and your issues, it can be very frightening, because you don't know how people are going to react. And like I said, I had plenty of people that have reacted in a very negative way, where I knew I needed to talk about it, but I was concerned what people would think of me. Would they view it as a weakness? Which in most sense, I actually view it as a strength. This is part of you. This is part of something you need to fight, and something that to work through. At least that's how I viewed it myself. And even being worried about talking about it, same point, that nobody can really tell my story for me. Only I can tell my story. And if anyone listens to this, and same thing for you as well, nobody can tell your story, and you don't know until you try if maybe your story you can help others just by talking about your experience. Where one of my favorite songs on the subject is Disease by Beartooth, where there's a line in the song that says, "Will clarity be the cure for my disease?" And the more understanding you have about how to fight back, how to control not going to that darkest place inside your mind. And sometimes it's not so much as a cure, but as a way to fight back, especially when it's at its worst. And eventually you learn that even when you have problems which would have been catastrophic before you knew how to push back against them, that you can push back them easier, that you can show others how to push back again. Yeah, sadly, sometimes you learn in a very horrible way. Sometimes you can't save everyone. You can't be there for everyone. And I wish I was for a friend of mine that last few years wound up committing suicide. Because we had fell out of contact, but I would see his mom every once in a while. I would ask him, "Hey, how's he doing?" Usually she'd give the same response where, "Oh yeah, he's fine. He's having fun living with his friends. Doesn't get much chance to come home because he's so busy with work and everything." And that was a typical response to hear about him. Like, okay, that's good. And sadly wound up finding out one day that off of a Facebook post, apparently he was not as well as I kept hearing from his mom. I'll say this about a lot of people that lose someone such a horrific way, that I wish I could have been there for him, because if some people are more like myself than not, I really wasn't comfortable in when I was going through all of this, and even to some extent, sure, when I was going through it, and even for some extent after the fact, I wasn't comfortable talking to people about it that hadn't gone through anything similar. Because trying to explain to someone what it's like for your mind to essentially be put through a blender, I mean, that's really what it feels like, where everything about you is just getting ripped to shreds and getting broken inside you till there's almost nothing left. And so we found out, yeah, my friend was 45 minutes before the funeral, sadly, we found out. And I looked at my wife and said, I have to go, gotta go. And she's like, okay, understandable. And she had someone who could watch the kids, that wasn't a concern. And then it came time to leave, and I looked at her and said, I can't go. She said, oh, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, I can't even. I'm so distraught by this and everything that's going on, I can't get off the couch. Because of my thought, I had the thought go through my mind, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I say something that hurts rather than helps? I mean, I know how fragile these situations can be, because I have a perspective of somebody who went through it. And told her, some of my condolences to the family. I wish I could, but I'm sorry, I just can't do it. And at the same point, was kind of kicking myself for doing that, because in the end, I thought, there are so many people that they don't see, or they haven't felt what it's like to go through severe mental health issues. And if I'm telling people constantly, well, you really should talk about it, be open about it, but I'm not doing it myself, I'm not sharing my story, my experiences, then what gives me the right to try and tell someone, hey, it'll really help people your story? So definitely not the way I would have chose to be a catalyst for motivation to talk about this kind of stuff, or try and help people understand this kind of stuff. Definitely not worth the cost. And I really do feel for anyone who loses someone this way. And we've lost quite a few celebrities, musicians, everything from Robin Williams, Chester Bennington, even more from it. Up to you whether you decide to suicide or just how you categorize drug overdose. That's up to you. Chris Farley, that was sadly a lot more than that. And yeah, after you go through traumatic experience like so many have, or like I have, going through that kind of darkness changes everything. Changes how you look at life, how you fit people around you, how you perceive the struggles that you've gone through. Yeah, I'm very grateful that Ninja Theory made this game, that has given me the opportunity to talk to a couple of friends, that they were confused why, more or less why, they knew the game was made about mental health issues, but at the same time they didn't know why certain things happened to the game that were screwing with their minds so much, where without anything to relate it to or be able to give a visual to explain it, you're trying to paint an image in their mind. It's hard to let anyone know what it's like going through that kind of trauma. And I started explaining to a few friends what it was like to go through the issues, and like enemies disappearing and reappearing being akin to the enemies you fight in your mind, how they can attack at different points, and how it feels like you're shadow boxing your problems but you can't hit them. How even the controls being, well, before they didn't tell you the controls at all, and how it was like trying to wade your way through a minefield where you didn't know why your mind was acting in such a way, and you kind of had to figure it out, whether you did it through therapy or trial and error in yourself. And even to the point of how the game ends. Almost the aspect of when you're at the end of some people it's harder to face their issues than not. Some people, when I say end, I mean end of true crisis, not end of all crisis. Hopefully this video helps someone or helps you through your own problems, or give somebody a little bit of perspective what it's like somebody's mind that gone through severe trauma or mental health issues, points of crisis. I just hope my story helps someone. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And hit the notification bell and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future content. If you would like to catch me live, you can catch me on Twitch at Back from the Dead 1. Have a great day, everyone, and have fun gaming.